Every fantasy manager is looking to identify players late in drafts that can put them over the top. Now, these players drafted outside the early rounds, they don't always have to be the big-time league winners. They just need to give us more value than the rest of the whole fantasy community expects from those players. Today, Anthony Cervino and I will look at players to target who typically fall outside the top 140 picks or 12th round in drafts. Remember to follow Anthony at The Real NFL Guru, and you can catch me over at Jim Coventry NFL. ADP data from June FFPC drafts. The ADP data can be found from our friends, fantasymojo.com. It's always my go-to for the most up-to-date and useful ADP. Definitely check them out. Anthony, we're going to get right in here. First player, and you're going to talk about this one for a while, Romeo Doubs. The only thing I want to point out before you talk about Romeo Doubs had a very good fantasy year last year, but he scored touchdowns, Romeo Doubs, and on 13.5% of his catches. That was insane. Very high number to sustain. Tell us why you like Doubs at pick 141.
I like Doubs at pick 141 purely for the price point. He's a very good wide receiver. He's not a great receiver. I don't think he's a bad receiver. I think he's one of those players that if you're looking for a high floor piece, because I've said this on many shows, and I think you've said it as well, Jim, not everybody is going to be a high ceiling player. And depending on your build, you want to get the players who can go into your starting lineup in a flex spot, or if one of your wide receivers are hurt, and they're going to go get you right around 10 PPR points and not lose you the week. And for me, that's Romeo Doubs. Last year, 10.3 fantasy points per game, only 96 targets. We've got to remember, this is a really crowded Green Bay wide receiver room, and they have two capable pass-catching tight ends. So there's a lot of proverbial mouths to feed for this offense, who, oh, by the way, I expect them to run a little bit more this year. So if we're drafting Doubs, we have to draft Doubs with the mindset that, hey, he's probably not going to give us a high ceiling, but we can put him in our lineups and we can depend on him. Now, you mentioned the touchdowns. Those 8 touchdowns might be an outlier, but if he still gets us his receptions and his yards, I think he'll be a fine fantasy play. And if you look at the other receivers going around him, I think I trust Doubs the most. What I also like about Doubs is that we already know the type of offense he's in the LaFleur offense. We believe Jordan Love is going to be a good quarterback. I don't know if last year was an anomaly or not, but I don't see him taking any type of step back. And look at the guys going around Doubs, who I feel are very similar with Fleur. Jacoby Myers, maybe guys like Josh Palmer. I feel like Doubs is the safest of those 3.
There's a couple points I want to add for listeners, and I think these also have some merit. There is a chance that Romeo Doubs is on a projection, or I should say an ascent, to be a third-year full breakout player. He's done well. So, I mean, in a breakout, yeah, but he's done well. But remember, when he came into the league, he wasn't a high draft pick. And he did well as a rookie. He did a little better last year. It's possible. We used to say back in the day, we have these third-year receiver breakouts. Sometimes those are the guys that aren't the superstars coming into the league day one, but they need time. So there's a world where Anthony hits on that. Another point I want to make about Doubs. The Packers run a very high level of 2 tight end sets. That means they often have 2 receivers on the field. But the good news is Jaden Reed was playing a ton of slot. And I don't know if Doubs is going to be moved off the field much at all. And Christian Watson also, I want to say almost 30% of the time, Christian Watson was moved into the slot as well. So Romeo Doubs, in my mind, is the only receiver on that team that is cast as a full-time outside receiver. That means he could see some extra field time. So I just want to add that if you're looking for Doubs for other reasons, those are some other possibilities to latch onto. Anthony, next player you're going to talk about is Dallas Cowboys' Brandin Cooks. Last year, Cooks ends up with 8 touchdowns, and that was the second most of his 10-year career. We know Dallas went a little pass heavier in the second game. Cooks had that one game where he bananas with 172 yards. There weren't a lot of big yardage games. But so the question, I guess, is you're going to talk about Cooks. Was he aging? Was he learning a new offense? Because when guys go to new offenses, that first year isn't often smooth unless you're Randy Moss or somebody of that ilk. What are your thoughts on Cooks and why people should be drafting him outside the top 140?
Last year, Cooks finished as a PPR wide receiver 38, and we're drafting him much later than that. And I believe last year was more of a down year. You bring up the new offense, getting the continuity down with Dak Prescott. I think we can potentially see a better season out of Brandin Cooks, but at least this is probably his floor. Or why do I believe it's his floor? Dallas didn't bring anything else in to contend with Brandin Cooks in that wide receiver 2 role. We kind of know what this offense is. Now, we believe Jalen Tolbert could take a step up, but he's probably going to fill in that Michael Gallup role. So I expect Brandin Cooks, who he's aging, but he's not ever, barring any type of injury or holdout from CeeDee Lamb, Brandin Cooks is going to see single coverage. He's going to see the weaker coverage of he and CeeDee Lamb. And we saw Brandin Cooks at times last year. And granted, it's probably against weaker opponents, but we've seen both Brandin Cooks and CeeDee Lamb thrive in those games. Not only in best ball, but I don't mind rostering CeeDee Lamb in our redraft formats. This is going to be a high octane passing attack in Dallas. Just like they didn't bring in any other wide receivers. They didn't bring in any other running backs. Now, I like Zeke. He's going to keep the chains moving. He's going to score a few touchdowns, but he's not the same player. So this running game, I hate using the word mid, but it's probably going to be mid at best. So across the board, I'm fine with taking Brandin Cooks going into his second year in this offense at his price. If anything, his price isn't going to go up. It's going to go further down. And I think he's going to beat his ADP. I see Brandin Cooks finishing once again in the top 40 in PPR.
Hey, before we go on, depending where you're watching, some are watching on Twitter, some are watching on YouTube. Remember, we have a somewhat new RotoWire Fantasy Football YouTube channel. We have a bunch of videos. They're going up like every day. There's stuff. There's shorts, there's mid-range videos, some of these live shows. If you're missing out on that, please consider checking it out. Definitely consider subscribing, hitting the like button, notifications, but we are really making a concerted effort. Our media team, we have a video editor, Mason Bazemore, making us look good. Alan Soslowski kind of running the media ship for us, and then Anthony and I and the other RotoWire contributors putting videos up there. Anthony, any quick words on that YouTube channel?
No, make sure, guys, if you're going to go and subscribe to the channel, hit the notification icon. What that does, it will alert you anytime we are live or we drop a new video. So that's handy. Just in case you want to know when we're on, in case you want to ask us questions, you can come and do that too. So a lot of great stuff going on, not only with Jim and I, but we have a lot of other great content creators here over at RotoWire. What I'm going to do, if you're watching on X right now, after the show, or maybe I'll even do it while Jim's talking, I'm going to drop a subscribe link to the channel right in the comment section on X right now.
And Anthony always knows he has time when I'm talking, so I can't shut my mouth. We'll go for a minute. Anthony's going to talk. Actually, let me talk about my player, and then I'm going to bring up Anthony's. I'm going to mix up the order here. So my player is Jermaine Burton. And Burton is still going outside the 160 picks. So that's like the 14th round in fantasy drafts. Some leagues, hey, smaller leagues, you might not even get noticed in. But I want to make a good case for Jermaine Burton here. The Bengals used a 3rd round pick on Jermaine Burton. Now, that's not a throwaway pick. And Burton played both at Georgia and Alabama. When he was on the field, that man could produce 4.45 40 time, which is very good speed. Talent is not a question. There were some other ancillary things that I believe cost Burton to drop in drafts, and no need to get into those because I don't think they really impact him at the NFL level. But all that said, the Bengals really, really, really need a slot receiver. The Bengals play 3 receiver sets at the 3rd highest rate in the league. But the difference between the Bengals 3 receiver set and like the Sean McVay one we see in Los Angeles is the Bengals have one of the widest splits of receivers, whereas the Rams receivers are they're in motion, they're blocking. But basically it's Chase out here, Higgins out here, but they need somebody, a difference maker in the middle of the field. Jermaine Burton was running in the slot during the off-season practices. So Jermaine Burton, assuming he locks down that slot role, and there's no guarantee he does, but he is in pole position for that, he is going to see the easiest coverage because teams are going to either, if they're in man, they're certainly going to double Chase or Higgins or both. There is going to be room in the middle of the field. And the level of athlete and player that Burton is with Joe Burrow as his quarterback, this could immediately become a very, very big deal. And remember, Cincinnati's defense was transitioning. They were bad. The coach is great, Lou Anarumo, but that talent, that's really broken down over time. They have Hendrickson's unhappy right now, which that doesn't bode well. All that said, they're going to have to throw. Burton's going to be in position, but I think you could have a potential smash outside the top 160 picks. Anthony, anything on Burton?
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head. There is a clear path to opportunity and playing time for Burton. And I like that you bring up not so much Jamar Chase, but what happens here with T. Higgins. I know they're saying that he's going to report, he's going to play, but he's dealt with some injuries in the past. So has Chase. So if you're looking for that dart throw rookie sleeper, what they path to opportunity, why not Jermaine Burton? We know through the years there's a vacated grouping of targets left by Tyler Boyd. Joe Burrow likes to be 3 deep at wide receiver, and Burton's probably that guy.
And realistically, we know they've thrown plenty passes to their tight ends. Oh my gosh, the guy like Tanner Hudson, players like Tanner Hudson, just seeing ridiculous numbers of targets. Look, those targets in the middle of the field, if Jermaine Burton comes out and plays the draft stock we think he was worth, he's going to get a lot of those targets. They're not going to check to the tight end because they're going to do that. If Burton is a real player, they're going to weaponize him in that offense. Anthony, there's another player we skipped over so I could talk a little bit. And you want to talk about Jaleel McLaughlin. And I'm excited to hear what you have to say. The thing that I found interesting is we know that he was a stud in weeks 4 to 6. Rushes 23 times for $170, adds 8 catches for 65. But what was weird, Anthony, was Sean Payton kind of put him under wraps after that. 4 fewer carries in 6 of his last 11 games, went over 6 rushing attempts once. I'm concerned that the size is going to relegate him in his coach's mind, but I want to hear you sell us on McLaughlin because I know you're a little higher on him than I am.
Yeah, we know there's some size concerns here, but there's also concerns in this backfield overall. It's kind of crowded when you look at guys like Javonte Williams, Samaje Perine here. They brought in Audric Estime, Tyler Batty. So it's really wide open, but I really do like what Jaleel McLaughlin brings to the table. He did flash a little bit, and that gives me something to grasp onto in these fantasy drafts, taking him. He's a low-cost player. I think there's some upside here. We also know in the past, and I get it, like he's not Alvin Kamara, but like in the past, Sean Payton liked to use that thunder and lightning when he had Ingram and Kamara. Is that something he could potentially try to replicate on a much lower basis with possibly Javonte Williams and Jaleel McLaughlin? McLaughlin's an excellent receiver out of the backfield. He's an okay runner. He was actually 5.1 yards per carry, not a ton of carries, 10th in yards per touch. Pretty good juke rate. He can break tackles. So he's very elusive for his size. The offense overall, it isn't going to be good. Is there going to be extended pass catching opportunities, assuming they're going to be playing from behind? I'm going to say yes. So if he carves out a role as a primary receiving back, why not take our shots on Jaleel McLaughlin in PPR leagues?
And that makes perfect sense. We will have to also note in the passing game, if they're trailing, that he can block well enough. And that could be a concern because whoever the quarterback is right now might be Bo Nix. Bo Nix's head might be on a swivel. But I like what you said. I mean, we saw, like you said, we see these dynamic players come out. And that means if they can get on the field, they can get the coach to give more touches. You're right. He definitely can be a difference maker. So also with Javonte Williams, I think Javonte Williams, a lot of people are going to blame last year on the coming back from the ACL injury. Look, he's never played extremely well at the NFL level yet. And my question when I watch film is, does he really have the vision to get past the second level? And I don't think he does. I think he runs what's blocked, and that's the end of it. And I think in addition to McLaughlin, who you talked about, I think Audric Estime is going to have a chance very quickly. If Sean Payton thinks Javonte Williams has a vision issue, that means he can't run his offense the way he wants to. And Audric Estime profiles to be able to do that and also add a physical element to the run game. So I wouldn't be surprised. And again, I don't know what Javonte Williams is going to bring in camp, but I wouldn't be surprised if Estime and McLaughlin ended up being the 2 more important running backs in his backfield. Anyway, like Williamson, I hope he bounces back, but I am concerned for him. Anyway, we've launched a new RotoWire Picks app. It offers recommendations and predictions for fantasy pick'em and player props on platforms like PrizePicks, BetMGM, and more, covering just about every sport. It's free to download on Apple and Android, and you can sign up within the app for a subscription to unlock all the features. But if you're a RotoWire subscriber, you just log in, you get full instant access. So definitely, if you're on YouTube, there will be a link in the description you'll want to check out. Otherwise, just go to the App Store, type in RotoWire Picks. Anthony, you pointed out something about how it can help you shop around. Can you quickly tell us that?
Yeah, one of the best things about this app, and I'm an average sports bettor, especially with player props, you can shop around different sports books and DFS type, like underdog sleeper. Now in New Jersey, I go to all the sports books, and you have access on this tool to FanDuel, BetMGM, I believe Bet Rivers, and DraftKings. So 4 different sports books that you can shop for the best line and the best price. And when you pull up a potential bet that you want to make, a potential market, it will not only show you RotoWire projections, it will show you sportsbook projections and DFS app projections. So you can see where everybody is projecting and also where the line is. So you can determine, should I take the over or should I take the under? And it also opens up, if you are middles better, where you can take the over and the under. It's a little bit risky, but if it comes in the middle, you could potentially have 2 winning tickets. So a lot of great things you can use this app for.
Yeah, and so last thing I'll say before we get to our next player, I always worried when I was like gambling. It's like, I don't have time to shop 5 sites because I'm doing all this work for fantasy. I'm producing content like this breakneck pace, videos, shows, and I just don't have time to shop 6 books. But on the RotoWire app now, that does the work for me. So if I use the accounts, I could just go to that site, click on, make that pick and go from there. So I think that's phenomenal. All right, next player, Darnell Mooney, going at pick 168. So that's about 14th, 15th-ish round, right around there. Later pick. Now, Anthony and I have talked a lot about Mooney this offseason. What I will say is this. The Rams coach, Zach Robinson, offensive coordinator, now he is running the Atlanta offense. Arthur Smith long gone. We are expecting to see 3 receiver sets. Even when they're in 2, though, Mooney's a full-time outside receiver, 4.3 speed. Now, Mooney's not going to get the 140 targets he had in Chicago in 2021 when he had a 1,000-yard season. But Kirk Cousins, the first good quarterback he's played with. This is the first potentially healthy offense he's played for. Drake London will be absorbing a lot of attention from defenses. If Kyle Pitts is utilized well, Pitts will draw a lot of attention. Mooney should see light coverage, blazing speed, and a quarterback that can get the ball to him. Don't be surprised to see Mooney in motion in this similar potential style to the Sean McVay tree of offenses, where we see those receivers moved around and deployed and schemed open out of those. Mooney may not see more than 90 targets, but if he could get in that 80, 90 target range, look out, because the potential for him in big plays and even some consistency, he is definitely on my radar. Anthony, I know you want to talk about Mooney a bit as well.
Yeah, absolutely love Darnell Mooney this year. At his price point, he's a smash. When you look at the guys going around him, Dotson, Downs, Leggett, Adam Thielen, give me Darnell Mooney all day. Love the situation he is in with Kirk Cousins, Drake London. We know everything that we love about this Falcons offense. Now, if we go back to that one big year Darnell Mooney had back in 2021, where he was a wide receiver, 27 fantasy points per game, 140 targets. We know he has it in him to be a player like this. And granted, he's not going to get 140 targets again, but he could also be more efficient with a quarterback like Kirk Cousins, who's by far is going to be the most accurate quarterback Darnell Mooney has ever had throwing passes to him. For example, last year, Justin Fields completed 40% of his deep balls, where Kirk Cousins completed 45%. So we already know what Darnell Mooney does best. He's a burner, better quarterback at getting him the football. Let's go back to that 2021 season one more time. He had 14 catches of over 20 yards, 3 catches over 40 yards, and 3 100-yard games. All Darnell Mooney needs is the right situation, the right quarterback, and the right system. He's checking off every box now that he's with the Atlanta Falcons. And what I love even more, if we go back to that year in 2021, he was the alpha, and he has no business being the alpha. Now in Atlanta, the defenses have to worry about Bijan Robinson, Kyle Pitts, and Drake London. Darnell Mooney, he's not going to get a lot of targets like Jim said, but he could be one of the more efficient receivers, and he's going to be one of those receivers who smashes his ADP.
Yeah, you and I cannot get enough shares of Darnell Mooney. The next player, and you want to talk about this one, Anthony, Bucky Irving of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Last year, Rachaad White had like 336 touches. Let me tell you this. Unless you are Derrick Henry or maybe even eventually Bijan Robinson, a big time back, Jonathan Taylor, no coaching staff wants to give a player 336 touches unless they absolutely have to. And last year, Rachaad White was in a situation. Look, Sean Tucker was terrible. They tried him a week or two, give him a few snaps, nothing. They benched him the rest of the year. Chase Edmonds, whatever happened, his career went south. They tried to put him in for a while. Certainly not enough to give him significant work, although they did move him in a little bit. So, Anthony, talk about Bucky Irving and why you like him at about pick 172.
I always like to preface this when we talk about guys like Bucky Irving and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers that year after year, it seems like they're trying to add another running back. Now, it hasn't worked out yet. And who knows if it's going to work out with Bucky Irving, but at this price, this ADP, we have to take our shots because Tampa Bay is telling us, just like the Bills are telling us, we want another running back. We don't want the guys we have handling all of these touches. Bucky Irving, very good running back after transferring to Oregon, topped 1,000-yard rushing in both seasons. Also a deceptively good pass catcher, caught 56 passes in 2023 with Oregon, showcasing the versatile skill set. He also averaged 6.8 yards per carry in 2022 and 6.3 yards per carry in 2023. Now, I get it's college, but Rachaad White last year, 3.7 yards per carry. So, can we get, and we're not going to get 6-7 yards per carry in the NFL from Bucky Irving, but can he be a more efficient runner than Rachaad White? I'll take my chances. And if you look at the guys going around Bucky Irving, like Elijah Mitchell, Khalil Herbert, like give me the guy like Bucky Irving in this situation, right? Because Elijah Mitchell is going to cut into Christian McCaffrey's workload. Khalil Herbert, that's going to be a three-headed monster backfield. Whereas if Bucky Irving is competent, I think he's going to see enough touches per game that we can stash him in our fantasy bench and use him when necessary. And knock on wood, if Rachaad White goes down, we have an RB1 right on our bench.
Another thing I want to quickly point out about Tampa Bay from a schematic standpoint, last year under Dave Canales, they ran a lot of two tight end sets. They had two receivers on the field, and teams were able to have enough bodies in the box. The offensive line interior blocking was not good. Rachaad White cannot break tackles or get yards after, so he was very inefficient as a runner. But this year, they bring in Liam Cohen to run the offense, and Liam Cohen from the Rams tree, coach of Kentucky a bit too. But I do fully expect Liam Cohen to use three receiver sets. And why is that important? First of all, they're going to spread the field a little bit, which should lighten up the box. Second of all, Liam Cohen talked about getting Chris Godwin in the slot where he belongs. He plays outside of two receivers, but you need Godwin in that slot. Godwin is a phenomenal blocker, a very strong player. And when you have those three receiver sets and you have lighter boxes, the inside receiver in today's NFL is being used to block. And that gives your running game more effectiveness because you have an extra body against a light box committed to blocking. So again, whether it be Bucky Irving and or Rachaad White, both potentially have a chance to see a little more room in the run game. But if you're going to Irving, it's another reason to like him because the rushing production will be better than we might actually have thought. Wan'Dale Robinson is next, still going well outside the top 180 picks in drafts. And what I always point out about Robinson, I know you've heard me talk about him quite a bit this offseason, but remember, 2022, he gets the ACL injury. Last year, he was very sluggish for most of the season until the week 13 bye. You could tell he was still recovering from that ACL. The offense was broken too. I get that. But in the first 10 games, Wan'Dale Robinson only hit the 40-yard mark one time, went over it once. Well, after that week 13 bye, 55 or more yards in 3 of his last 4 games. He looked like the player we thought we saw before the ACL injury the year prior. And we know that he's going to see at least 2/3 of his snaps, Wan'Dale Robinson in the slot. And Daniel Jones might not be a great quarterback, but he can make those slot throws. Malik Neighbors is going to draw a lot of attention. He's going to be covered heavily. He's going to get targets, but there needs to be somebody else. And that offensive line is still trash in New York. So getting rid of the ball quickly is going to be really, really important. And Wan'Dale Robinson is that man. Now, Robinson was 68th percentile in yards after the catch last year, but that factors in a player who I believe did not recover until after week 13. So that could have been 85th, 90th percentile. This is a real dangerous player in PPR leagues, and I think people are sleeping on him to a fault.
Yeah, I'm not going to go too far into here. You checked off all the right boxes. I do want to bring up the fact that Saquon Barkley's gone, Darren Waller's gone. All of those pass catching opportunities, they're all not going to be funneled to Devin Singletary. They're all not going to be funneled to Daniel Bellinger or Theo Johnson. Why not Wan'Dale Robinson in the slot? Maybe he's the biggest beneficiary of those vacated targets, which is a big reason why Jim and I are both on this player going, at a point in a fantasy draft. Demario Douglas, Pearsall, who we don't even know if he's going to see the field this year. Right. Marvin Mims on that offense. Give me all the Wan'Dale Robinson. This is another example of a high floor player that when he's in there, I don't think he's going to lose your fantasy week. Now, Daniel Jones might help lose your fantasy week, but I don't think it's going to be on Wan'Dale Robinson.
Right. And again, those slot throws will not be very difficult. And the separation that Wan'Dale Robinson gets open quickly, it gives his quarterback a little margin for error. So there's that as well. Anthony's going to talk about Clyde Edwards-Helaire, who is going after pick 190. So that's now remember, Edwards-Helaire received very little attention free agency. The Chiefs eventually brought him back on a 1-year deal. We know that in the first 3 years in the league, we had at least 4.3 yards per carry for Edwards-Helaire. Last year, 3.2. But Anthony, talk about why we might still like a late pick on Clyde Edwards-Helaire.
And I know people listening right now, you think I'm nuts, you think I'm crazy, but I am taking some shots on CEH. And let's not, we got to put it out there. He's been disappointing. He's been a bust through the years. But right now, unless they bring in another back, no more Jerick McKinnon. All they have is generic Prince. We know who he is. Keontae Ingram, Imani Bailey, a lot of unknowns. So Isaiah Pacheco's one injury away from CEH being fantasy relevant. And I get it. He can get on the field and not do anything with it, but why not get a piece of this offense? Last year, he was 99th percentile in average yards after the catch and 81st percentile positive run rate. He's never going to live up to his draft stock when he was drafted late in the first round a few years ago. But in fantasy football, give me the clear-cut RB2. Again, right now he is a clear-cut RB2. Give me the clear-cut RB2 on this offense because if Pacheco, he's a hard runner. If he gets banged up and misses time, you have somebody you can slide into your fantasy lineups, and who knows, he could get you, double-digit PPR points if you need it.
I also want to point out Isaiah Pacheco, and you intimated this a little bit. He runs very recklessly. He runs as if he's Derrick Henry, but he's not. And the thing is, in his first year, Isaiah Pacheco had 2 offseason surgeries, one to his shoulder, one to his hand, from the running style he has, because he does not shy away from contact at all. Last year, remember, in season, he had a shoulder procedure, missed a slight amount of time. But this is a player. It's not if, but it's when. You cannot run that way, that violently, being as small as he is, and really think you're going to keep getting away. So if you're, again, we love him as a player, Pacheco, but the odds of him missing in time, the longer he plays, to me, with that style, goes up and up. So investing in Clyde Edwards-Helaire, you might get a couple more games than you think out of him, and who knows how much it could end up being actually. Anthony, were you finishing up a thought on him before I cut you off?
No, not at all.
All right, RotoWire covers all of the fantasy sports. And did you know you can get a free 2-day trial with no credit card needed? To check everything we have to offer out, to get trial, go to rotowire.com/Jim. Check out all we have. Hopefully you like it. If you joined the team, fantastic. If you don't, at least you looked and saw what we're all about. All right, Anthony, next player. I know there's a player that I'm very high on, and we'll find out in a minute if you are as well. Michael Wilson of the Arizona Cardinals. And I mean, his ADP has gotten lower than Wan'Dale Robinson's. It's almost like Michael Wilson's value has gone a little bit down the further we have gotten into the fantasy draft season, and it befuddles me. And so I get it. People don't watch Arizona Cardinal games. I get that. Unless somebody watches all the games, they're probably not watching a lot of Arizona football, especially last year. Clayton Tune and Joshua Dobbs. So I get it. But Michael Wilson, as a rookie last year, with two backup type quarterbacks, Wilson had at least 56 yards in 5 of his first 8 games. Just think about that for a minute. Think about how solid that is. And Wilson wasn't like a first or second round pick in the end. So it wasn't like somebody was expected to make an instant impact. And yet that was significant. Then he dealt with injury. So Michael Wilson missed some time. He played in 1 game from weeks 9 through 14. And then he comes back. So Michael Wilson comes back. Kyler Murray's in the saddle now running the team. But here's the thing. The first 2 games back, Wilson appeared to be completely healthy. He did like nothing. But in the last 2 games, finally, it looked like Wilson was himself with Murray. Wilson averages 5 catches and 65 yards in those last 2 games. I believe he scored a touchdown as well. So now he showed enough that he is a good NFL receiver. Now Marvin Harrison comes in. Obviously, Harrison is going to be the main target of opposing defenses. Wilson should see favorable coverage as a full-time outside receiver. Trey McBride also has to be dealt with in the middle of the field. So this is a great spot. And remember, Kyler Murray, although league plays 73% zone, Murray with his mobility, and Murray likes throwing to the perimeter. So this is a good match here. I think that Wilson is going to blow that ADP away, and I'm getting as many shares as I can. Anthony, anything on Wilson?
Yeah, I think the reason why we're seeing his ADP slip a little bit, Zay Jones, like they did bring in Zay Jones, and Zay Jones is going to be okay, but I like Michael Wilson more. A lot of the reasons you highlighted, plus we do expect, or at least we hope, he's going to get more consistency at quarterback with a healthy Kyler Murray, and we hope and expect that Michael Wilson takes a step forward entering year 2. I don't think he's going to be a 1,000-yard receiver by any means, but for where we're paying for him in fantasy, he should be productive enough to return value on your fantasy team.
Last thing, don't forget that Arizona projects to remain a very talent-deficient defense. And they are going to have to score points. And then this Kyler Murray's capable of that. So this team is going to have to probably throw very often. And when you increase those pass attempts, somebody's got to get them. And Michael Wilson will be on the field, probably almost a full-time player. So there's that. All right. The last player I want to talk about, and Anthony will have one more as well. I want to talk about Demarcus Robinson. And Demarcus Robinson going pick 221. So in shorter, smaller drafts, he's probably not even getting drafted. But in the deeper leagues, very deep, he is getting drafted. Here's what I want you to know. Look, we know who Demarcus Robinson is. He has been around the league for a long time. And actually, last year, Robinson was on his worst pace of his career through 10 games. He had 5 catches for 52 yards. He looked like an absolute nothing. And then Sean McVay decided in week 13, you know what? I'm going to make Robinson a part of my offense. McVay pushed Tutu Atwell to the side completely. And he moved Robinson in because Robinson could block a bit too. And that's a big deal with McVay's receivers that you can block. Well, in the last 5 games, once Sean McVay decided, Robinson, you are in the lineup. Demarcus Robinson averages, again, last 5 games, 4 catches, 63 yards, and 0.8 touchdowns. It's a bigger body. And all that said, the snaps went up weeks 14 through 17, 56 to 59 snaps. So right now, going into the season, I have to think, looking at the depth chart, that Demarcus Robinson retains that number 3 receiving role. And remember, the Rams play like 92% 3 receiver sets. So their 3 receivers are always on the field. So Robinson retains that role. I could totally see him continuing to average at 4 catches, maybe not 60 yards, but even 45, 50 yards. And even, 0.3 of a touchdown. You're getting him outside the top 200 picks. He could help you in bye weeks. Go ahead, Anthony. Anything?
I'm not as high on Robinson as you are, but I will be having my shares. You talked about that late season surge. He had 5 straight games with at least 13.6 PPR points. He scored a touchdown in 4 straight of those 5. I know that's not sustainable, but it shows that he has the trust of Matthew Stafford. He's certainly in the right offense to where if you're the 3 in this offense, you're going to have a role. You're going to be productive. There's no Tyler Higbee this year. And also, let's face the fact, Cooper Kupp, we got to worry about injuries with him. If Cooper Kupp goes down, Puka Nacua is not going to see 40 targets a game. Demarcus Robinson's going to have fantasy value. So there's a lot of reasons to draft him.
I will say this. Sean McVay is a phenomenal coach, and I've known that for a long, long time. Last year, I had no hesitation calling him a genius. I am still sticking to my guns. If Puka Nacua was on 31 other teams, a 400-yard season would have been incredible.
Yeah.
McVay, obviously in that offense and the way he was used, McVay used him just like Cooper Kupp. Cooper Kupp had that 1,900-yard season. Seriously, if Cooper Kupp wasn't with McVay, what's his best season? 1,200 yards? Maybe he would have gotten a 1,200-yard season depending where he played. But to make Puka Nacua a 1,400-yard receiver, Demarcus Robinson averaging 60 yards a game for a 4-week period, Kyren Williams, who looked lost as a rookie, they installed the downhill running scheme. All of a sudden, Kyren Williams is way over 100 scrimmage yards per game. Sean McVay, I cannot say enough, but if you're going to play on the field full time for him, you will be relevant because it's McVay. And of course, you said Matthew Stafford calling the shots. If Stafford got hurt, the whole thing goes because Stafford is really the trigger man, and he's amazing at it. Anthony, last player to talk about today. You'd like to talk about Zach Ertz going even later than Demarcus Robinson, pick 228. Tell us why you might like Zach Ertz. Sometimes he gets made, he's a third tight end in the league, maybe even a deep second. Why would somebody look at Zach Ertz?
And Benson at the rookie, he's going ahead of Ertz in redraft. It's a head scratcher to me. I think Zach Ertz, at least this year, we talk about bridge quarterbacks. He's kind of going to be that bridge tight end. And we saw him a little bit, hold off Trey McBride. And obviously McBride comes in and gets unlocked after Zach Ertz goes down. But Zach Ertz told reporters this offseason, hey, the reason why I signed with the Washington Commanders was for Cliff Kingsbury. Thinks Cliff Kingsbury and his offense is a genius. I think Cliff Kingsbury or Zach Ertz will be the top tight end. Now, are we going to get a healthy full season out of Zach Ertz? Probably not. But in the games that Zach Ertz is in there, he's going to be a high floor player. I like to joke around and make the comp. Like, if you remember Jason Witten down these last few years in Dallas, he caught the ball and he fell. Those receptions still counted in PPR leagues. Those receptions still counted in tight end premium. So why not Zach Ertz, who is absolutely free right now? He's one of those players that if you don't draft him, you're going to be streaming a tight end in week 2 and on the waiver wire, you're going to want to drop a lot of your fab on him. Because I can't believe he had 8 targets and 7 catches in week 1. How did he go undrafted? It's because everybody's enamored with the rookie and what the rookies did last year. But I think Zach Ertz, again, as long as he's healthy, he should be the guy in Washington.
Yeah, the point of this show, again, we outline players going outside the top 140, players that either one or both of us thought had value at that ADP that would be beyond what it is. And that is a key to fantasy football. Whether you like these players or not, it's you finding players in those later rounds that you feel will be ones that give you an edge on the field. Like we said earlier, most of these players we named, they are not going to be league winners. They are not going to be a top 3 receiver or a top 3 running back. That's not likely to happen. But what is likely to happen is these players should have more fantasy relevant weeks than the fantasy community is expecting. Again, if you don't agree, that's fine, but you got to identify your own players at that point that you like in these later rounds. But it is a key, and have a strategy for late. Don't just get past the first 13 rounds and say, okay, well, let's just see who's on the board. Already have those players targeted out so that you're making an aggressive move for them. So Anthony and I will be back on the Twitter live on Friday. It'll be actually we're going to pre-record one. We have to pre-record one because I'm going to be off on Thursday and Friday. So anyway, we'll get that up on the X page. Anthony and I put it on the X page, and we're going to be back with that. But also, again, remember, RotoWire YouTube, we have videos going up every day. Anthony, remind people how to get to that if they're not on that right now.
You can go to YouTube in the search bar, search out RotoWire Fantasy Football, or I did this earlier. I copied the link and I pasted it in the comments under the show you're watching right now on X. So if you just, click on it, go look through the comments, you'll see my tweet. Just click on that link. That'll bring you right to the YouTube page where you can subscribe.
We've had a great audience for these shows. A lot of people have been showing up. Thank you. We appreciate that you're spending your time with us because we know you got a ton of choice out there. So thank you for trusting us with some fantasy football information. We'll keep working hard to give you the best that we have. For Anthony Cervino, who you'll follow at The Real NFL Guru, you'll find me over at Jim Coventry NFL. Everybody have a great rest of your day, and we'll catch you. And if we don't see you before the holiday, have a great 4th of July.
Yep.